as per Cherie's introduction, I'm mainly here really to talk today about the Community Land Trust in Petersfield and the progress we've had to date on the first site that we've looked at and how we kind of went about setting up the CLT and move forward from there. We are much much newer to the process, I suppose, than Calder, and so we've only been doing it for a few years, and we're just in the process of working up our first site. But hopefully, it gives an interesting perspective on more of a kind of self and custom build site than perhaps some others. So yeah, it's a little running order. I'm going to say briefly a little bit about MH Architects, but mainly going to be running through the kind of process we've gone through with the CLT and where we go from here, where we're going over that hopefully in the next few months. So yeah, we, as mentioned, I'm a director of MH Architects. We do a lot of different work, but a lot of affordable housing for various either RPs or councils or community groups, which is something that obviously over the last few years there's tended to be more of those projects around. So you can see in the bottom right corner, we've got a planning application in currently in West Sussex for 12 homes for Westbourne Community Trust, which we are hoping to have a planning permission before the month is out. Maybe that's a bit optimistic, but hopefully in the next few months. So that'll be a really positive step forward. And we do have we are keen on emphasising the importance of fabric first approach to sustainability and to energy design. And as such, we've been members of the Passive House Trust for quite a few years, doing a number of projects that have been certified. So yeah, the CLT. So really, the CLT in Petersfield came out of the Neighbourhood Plan that was actually signed off in early 2016, but had a referendum in 2015. As part of that, the steering committee looked at two main sites as opportunities for self and custom build housing, alongside other sites that were for more traditional, shall we say, market-led schemes. The reason behind that was to try and address a perceived shortfall in affordable family housing. We're in the middle of the South Downs Park in Petersfield, so property values are fairly significant. I think the issue that seemed to be emerging as part of the work to put the Neighbourhood Plan together was that there were lots of people in probably a little bit undersized family housing. They didn't really have the means to step up to them by a larger 3 or 4 bed house as their kind of needs and their family grew, and they probably also weren't really eligible for more traditional, so we say, affordable housing support. So there's a bit of a kind of gap in the middle, and that's what we were looking to address with those two sites. H2 was allocated, I think, about 100 homes, and H11 was allocated for around about 11 homes. So the H2 site was always more of a commercial entity and was owned by a developer looking to bring that forward. So we really, as part of the kind of process that came out of the Neighbourhood Plan, we were never going to really focus on H2. It was always more likely that we were going to be looking at H11 as a possibility to bring forward a slightly different version of affordable housing. So yeah, the actual CLT, we formed a steering group. This was actually, I was only just about getting involved in the project at this time, so I wasn't part of the first steering group. But the idea was to start trying to work towards how H11 could be delivered by a community group and what the best way to deliver that would be. So the eventual process led us to a CLT and led us to getting some startup funding and guidance from the National CLT Network, which was very useful at the time. And we then moved forward to obviously becoming a limited company CLT, and then looking at funding for how we could start the planning process on H11. So there's a small picture there of H11. This was the diagram that was included in the Neighbourhood Plan, so it was very rough. Wasn't really a kind of detailed design guide as you might get in some allocations. It was very, very broad, and the principle of bringing the site together was something that we would then kind of get stuck on a little bit, because there's actually multiple landowners the site. It wasn't one landowner. But we went forward with the process kind of initially with some funding application to locality, which we received and helped us to kind of get things moving. And then from through East Hants District Council to help start progressing surveys and things like that that we needed to understand the baseline conditions on the site. And then eventually to Homes England for the rest of the funding to take us to an outline planning application. So the driver from the Neighbourhood Plan through to the CLT was to try and bring forward this site for custom and self-build. So the custom, there's still quite a detailed debate, I'd say, going on about exactly how you would offer custom build. And I think the route we've kind of settled on is that we want to be able to facilitate people who maybe aren't completely confident in building their own house or kind of bringing forward a self-build plot on their own without assistance. So we want to have a situation where people can use a baseline design and adapt that and customize that to something that they want to do, to take that through the planning process rather than necessarily start from scratch in a kind of grand design type way, which I don't think is necessarily that affordable. And I think that potentially puts people off from the people that we want to really meet the need of in this site. So we looked at, while I say about the large units, we are looking at a mix of plot and dwelling sizes, because I think there is a need from people who are potentially currently in flats or in 2-bed properties in the town, who may not be in a position to be able to afford a 4-bed property, but they may be in a position to afford a 3-bed property. So we are having a bit of flexibility in the size and tenure of those, and I think that's the discussion we're currently having with South Downs National Park, who are the planning authority, in terms of how do we meet their affordable criteria, which is more slanted, as it would normally be, more slanted towards a rented, whether it be social or affordable rent products. And obviously on a site where you're trying to sell individual plots, that's not necessarily something that's going to work as a whole scale, or to achieve the percentages that they would like to achieve. So we're currently in discussion with them about whether we have the CLT potentially retains 2 homes and then rents those at lower than affordable rent prices, to try and help with fitting another market, or filling a gap in another market that currently exists in the town. Yes, the Neighbourhood Plan restricted these sites. There was a lot of concern, I think, during the plan process about the issue of someone potentially coming in from further afield and just bidding more than anyone else and buying a plot on the site without any local connection. I think that was one of the things there was a lot of debate about with the Neighbourhood Planning Inspector, in terms of how we could define a local connection policy. So it's actually relatively wide ranging, in the sense that it includes people who've worked in Petersfield for 12 months or more. It includes family connection, as you would expect with some other local connection policy, but it doesn't restrict someone from moving to Petersfield for only 12 months and then potentially becoming part of this. So I think it needed to be wide ranging, and we don't want to have a situation where we've got no people who can actually, or limited numbers of people who can actually buy a plot. So yeah, the idea behind it is there wouldn't be, what we're trying to do is avoid having any market sale of plots whatsoever. So they would be, any that aren't for rent would be a limited stake, so 80% potentially of market value in perpetuity. So that'll be enforced through a covenant in the deeds. So we took quite a lot of advice from a solicitor who I think works with the National CLT network about how to go about doing that, and that's partly what we're working up at the moment with our own solicitors in terms of how to do that. So yeah, obviously I think I caught the end of the Calder presentation. I think they mentioned about the issue of cash flow and getting funding, and I think that has been one of the key challenges we've found over the past kind of 4 years or so, is how do we have the funding in place at the right time to enable us to then move forward with planning in a timely manner. So we've had things, it's a greenfield site, so we've had a lot of work to do on ecology, and that carries on over over a calendar year, so it's quite a long time period to fund quite a significant cost. So those things all had to be kind of programmed out and worked out as part of the way that we were moving things forward. So yeah, allocation, we are currently working on an allocation system, because it's not going to be a situation where we have highest bidder. It's going to be a set value for the plots, and then people based on a need basis, because the baseline criteria will be that someone can afford it, so they'll have to have a self-built mortgage in principle and funding in place to be able to achieve that. So this is not necessarily for the end of affordable housing that we often work with at MH Architects, which is on the kind of probably on the very needy end of the scale. It's trying to fill a different void. So we're still developing that, but that's something that we're hoping to roll out in the next. We'll have a kind of criteria for that in the next few months. And what we're also looking at is potential rebates on the plot value for people achieving standards, sustainability standards on the homes. So we haven't defined the exact amount of that rebate at the moment, but the idea would be that we, if you achieved a certifiable standard of one type or another, so it could be passive house, it could be ACB standard, those plots, those homes, those homeowners would receive some of the money they paid for the plot back as an incentive to do it. So you can see some images over the next few pages of the architects that we have employed to do this scheme. So reformat, they've produced for the pre-application booklet, which is the stage we're at the moment. So we've carried out almost all the baseline surveys for the full planning application we need. So ecology, ground conditions, tree survey, lots of other bits that fed into it, highway survey, things like that. So we're in a position where we're very close to we're going to be very close to submitting an application post receiving pre-application feedback. We've had several informal meetings with the South Downs Park, and we are now in a formal pre-app process with them in terms of the preferred option, which you can see there on the right hand side. And at the same time, we are, which I'll come to in a moment, in engagement, we are looking with these options we've created and the preferred option, which I've shown there, to further widen our engagement with the wider public on this scheme and how we can potentially take it forward. So we're hoping to put outline in the spring, which would be good. It'd be a good milestone. It's taken a long time to get here. So yeah, the engagement. So we have an existing list of members that has grown slightly over the years we've been going. So we've got about 45 members, and we've got a list of other people who are interested to be kept up to date with what's going on at the CLT and specifically Reservoir Lane. Part of obviously the process of setting up was to get a website going. So we set the website up in 2018, and we now have been in a. Have I skipped stage? No, that's good. Okay, so we have got the project manager on board. The project manager has recently set up a specific website for this project, and we're using that to link to our own website, but to provide an avenue for people to register, but also to hold consultation events. Obviously, in the current situation, we're not holding physical consultation events at the moment. That may change if things are relaxed in the summer, but at the moment we're looking at digital consultation events. We've started trying to reach a wider audience, so going through schools and there's a local group that is run through Facebook in Petersfield that has a lot of members through the surrounding parishes in Petersfield. So we're trying to reach a wider audience with the fact that we are moving this forward now, and hopefully, and I think the initial consultation starts on the. Fine, sorry about that. That was internet dropped out. Let me share that again. And go back to the page we were on. Yeah, so we're then obviously looking to make an outline planning submission. So the way that we're approaching it for self-build and custom build plots is to obtain outline planning permission for us to then build the site infrastructure, so site access and servicing, and to sell serviced plots essentially to those people who are on the reduced market sale plots, and then potentially build the plots that we would retain ourselves. So we are the first stage, the first major stage really is the outline planning submission, and being in the South Downs Park does add complication. I think we're in a positive position because we have an allocated site, but we still have to approach it in the right way, as you would do if it was a site that wasn't allocated. So there's been a lot of work in terms of developing a landscape-led approach to how we bring the site forward. So we're hopeful that we can do that in fairly early in spring, and then with a view to before the autumn, hopefully, if we get permission, we're then in a positive position to move forward. And the next stages, which would be the funding for site infrastructure, and the build process for our plots, and then obviously marketing and selling the plots. So we're in discussion at the moment about marketing with a number of local agents in terms of gauging prices, and obviously then that sets the reduced market value price, and also looking at how we can assist plot purchasers if they require it. I think we're very keen not to force anyone down a particular route. I think but we want to provide a bit of a support kind of level if people feel they need it, so that it doesn't put people off, because ultimately want the widest range of people who would be interested to be able to come and do this if they can. So that's where we are with the process at the moment. And you can see on the right hand side here, just before questions, you can see that this is the kind of thing that we'll end up with going into planning. So it's actually showing a zone to build rather than actually a plot. So if in a minute I'll go back a few pages, but you can see an actual outline of houses. This is actually more like what we're going to get outline permission for, which would be a zone for building. And then within that zone, the purchasers would have a maximum footprint they could build. So it's trying to limit it, so you can't build something right next to your neighbour's house, which is obviously going to impinge on what they're doing, but you're still giving people some freedom and some individuality to be able to do what they think is right on the site. So yeah, that's where we are. So a lot earlier on, but we've been very fortunate probably since the first lockdown that we've really started ramping up the level of involvement, and we've managed to get our Homes England funding, which has taken us to the next level. So the email addresses the website addresses are there in case anyone wants to visit for more information. Feel free to register for information. You will get updates from the mailing list if you want to, and obviously let me know if you have any questions.